This is a short one. It's called From Obit to Possible Epitaph, and it's for James S. Moran, 1907, 1999. And it's just comes from an article I read in the newspaper, and this is a direct quote. And it seems perfect for today. It's a sad day for American capitalism when a man can't fly a midget on a kite over Central Park. Evidently, it was something he wanted to do, and they didn't allow him to. It was consensual, by the way, in case any of you were wondering. All right, English. You need to speak Singlish to express a Singaporean feeling. I never learned Singlish. I cannot speak Taglish, but I've registered the tonal shifts of Dumglish, Bumglish, and Scumglish. I do not know English, but I will study it down to its black and broken bones. I do not know English, but I speak dung and dungaree, satrap and claptrap. Today I speak barbecue and canoe. Today I speak running dog and yellow dog. I do not know spinglass, but I hear humdrum and humdinger, bugaboo and jigaboo. I do not know Anglish, but I can tell you that my last name consists of 3 letters, and then technically all of them are vowels. I do not know Umglish, but I do know how to eat with 2 sticks. Oh, but I do know English because my father's mother was English, and because my father was born in New York City in 1921 and was able to return to America in 1949 and become a citizen. I no speak Chinese, Chanel, or Cheyenne. I do know English because I'm able to tell others that I am not who they think I am. I do not know Chinese because my mother said that I refused to learn it from the moment I was born, and that my refusal was one of the greatest sorrows of her life, the other being the birth of my brother. I do know Chinese because I understood what my mother's friend told her one Sunday morning, shortly after she sat down for tea. I hope you don't mind that I parked my helicopter on your roof. Because I do not know Chinese, I've been told that I am not Chinese by a man who translates from the Spanish. He said he had studied Chinese and was therefore closer to being Chinese than I could ever be. No one publicly disagreed with him, which according to the rules of English means he's right. I do know English, and I know that knowing it means that I don't always believe it. The fact that I disagree with the man who translates from the Spanish is further proof that I'm not Chinese, because all Chinese living in America are hardworking and earnest and would never disagree with someone who's right. This proves I even know how to behave in English. I do not know English because I got divorced, and therefore I must have misunderstood the vows I made at City Hall. I do know English because the second time I made a marriage vow, I had to repeat it in Hebrew. I do know English because I know what fortune cookie means when it's said of a Chinese woman. The authority on poetry announced that I discovered I was Chinese when it was to my advantage to do so. My father was afraid that if I did not speak English properly, I would be condemned to work as a waiter in a Chinese restaurant. My mother, however, said that this was impossible because I didn't speak Cantonese, because the only language waiters in Chinese restaurants know how to speak was Cantonese. I do not know either Cantonese or English, Anglish or English. Anglish is a language everyone can speak, but no one listens to it. I do know English because my father's mother was Ivy Hillier. She was born and died in Liverpool after living in America and China, and claimed to be a descendant of the Huguenots. I do know English because I misheard my grandmother and thought she said I was a descendant of the Argonauts. I do know English because I remember what made in Japan meant when I was a child. I learned over and over again that I do not know Chinese. Yesterday, a man asked me how to write my last name in Chinese because he was sure that I had been mispronouncing it, and that if this was how my father pronounced it, then the poor man had been wrong all his life. I do not know Chinese even though my parents conversed in it every day. I do know English because I had to ask the nurses not to put my mother in a straitjacket and reassure them that I'd be willing to stay with her until the doctor came the next morning. I do know English because I left the room when the doctor told me I had no business being there. I do not know Chinese because during the Vietnam War, I was called a gook instead of a chink and realized that I had managed to change my spots without meaning to. I do not know English because when my father said that he'd like to see me dead, I was never sure quite what he meant. I do not know Chinese because I never slept with a woman whose vagina slanted like my mother's eyes. I do not know either Chinese or English or Chinese, and because of that, I did not put a gravestone at the head of my parents' graves, as I felt no language mirrored the ones they spoke. Hearsay song. They're dying and I want to reach them before they're gone. Not that I know what I would say to them when I get there, their songs rippling beneath temporary sky as I approach, as I'm doing now, even though I'm nowhere near wherever they are, swirling in blossoming dust and dreaming they're not. They are dying and I want to reach out before they're gone, just as I want to reach myself before I too am gone, another blossom sliding into slime. What notes do I hear drenched in fiery sky? Are these ghosts rising up before me, or gasps of dust near a lake covered by algae? They're dying out and I want to reach them before their names vanish, before they become ghosts dying in pink algae and ruined vowels. Not that I know what their songs say, telling sting of monstrous human torrent, wheeling above burning story of lost lives, tapering branches of smoke, red and yellow leaves falling. They're dying out and I want to reach them before my name joins theirs in plastic matrimony, before a blue-eyed undertaker powders my nose, or I turn to powder and squirt gun of unprofitable insects, secrets folded away, never rinsed in the scum corner, history erasing traces of its nothing new. Wow, it's going to be a happy book. All right, I don't know who the senator is that said this, but I know he said it. I think he was from Wisconsin, actually. I dreamed the senator announced on national television. If you're over 65, you should do us all a favor. You should hurry up and die as cheaply and efficiently as possible. This being America, these are the facts. You're a drag on society, a stick stuck in the wheel of progress. I don't know why we still accord you human status when all you do is take up space and cost us money, like a bawling infant or a surly pet, when you are neither, and you aren't spending or saving enough to justify your pathetic existence, or you're spending it on laxatives because you're full of shit, and we already got enough on our hands, so go on and get out. If you're over 65, you need too much attention, and you've already had enough from us and you shouldn't get any more, you whiny bag of flatulence, you slimy patch of expectorant sliding down a dirty wall. If you're over 65, the government is sending you money, wads of money every month because you didn't earn enough in your lifetime to take care of yourself in your old age. You weren't able to think ahead, which means you're a failure. As worthless as the trash my wife carries to the curb every Wednesday morning, because I'm too busy trying to figure out how to get rid of you, and you, and you, and you. And frankly, not a single one of you is worth dealing with. If you're over 65, why not choose cremation? Step into oncoming traffic or fall off a bridge. Just get on with it. I'm sure there are enough people waiting to pick through the little heap you accumulated in your miserable life. You might as well end the pain and start giving away everything now. You won't need it where you're going. If you're over 65, you're breathing my air. It's time you stop, because my family and I need it up more than you do. We always did. So I wrote a number of sonnets based on during COVID, since I never left the house. I followed a lot of online threads uh, about how wonderful the Chinese were for causing the Wuhan virus. So, and opinion is the English way we say Chinese. And I just called it Opinion Sonnets. And this is Sonnet 4. And you don't know who's speaking. It's obviously not me. Plus, I don't understand their food. Who eats chicken feet and eggs buried in mud is unwholesome. Something dirty slithers along in their uncleanliness. You see, what no one is saying is how many of them like to eat animals that got no eyes, some kind of in-between thing. Plus, what kind of people eat six-legged creatures and dried duck blood? You know there's something not right about putting frogs and grasshoppers together. They aren't friends on earth, so why serve them at the same dinner? Egyptian sonnets. The Egyptians didn't write sonnets, so I thought I'd write them for them. One. I'm just going to read one. Don't be vexed, dear jackals. Look upon this pavilion night where wounded statues murmur unutterable things, and words circle themselves like broken satellites, strange devices harnessed with wings. Let your pages charm the charmed of our brief time, hunkered down in their glowworm hermitage, sparkling with carrion, stars as thick as flies. Subterranean cataract, portal, precipice, bastion, fall through rifts of sky, and black foam covers our dented prows, painted eyes. Oh, my beloved, look through your tears and your cries. Heaven still sits inside a gem, copied in pomegranate and vermilion. Genghis Chan, Private Eye. I like Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, and I probably have a guilty pleasure of watching too many Charlie Chan movies. So I decided to make up my own detective. Genghis Chan, Private Eye 1. I was floating through a cross-section with my dusty wine glass when she entered, a shivering bundle of shredded starlight. You don't need words to tell a story. A gesture will do. These days, we're all parasites looking for a body to cling to. I'm nothing more than riffraff splendor drifting past the runway. I always keep a supply of lamprey lipstick around, just in case. She laughed, a slashed melody of small shrugs. It had been raining in her left eye. She began, a cloud, a story broken in two, maybe four places, wooden eyelids and a scarf of human hair. She paused. I offer you dervish bleakness and glistening sediment. It was late, and we were getting jammed in deep. I was on the other side, staring at the snow-covered moon pasted above the park. A foul lump started making promises in my voice. ill-advised love poem. Come live with me, and we will sit upon the rocks by shallow rivers. Come live with me, and we will plant acorns in each other's mouth. It would be our way of greeting the earth before it shoves us back into the snow, our interior cavities brimming with disagreeable substances. Come live with me before winter stops to use the only pillow the sky ever sleeps on, our interior cavities brimming with snow. Come live with me before spring swallows the air and birds sing. So this, I was commissioned by the Walker Arts Center to write a series of poems for Eve Klein because they were having a big show there. So I wrote a series called Further Adventures in Monochrome, and this is just the first in the series. You'd think we were at war or something with all these planes. Or are those the ones that are flying because they didn't fly the other day? Further Adventures in Monochrome. My fundamental self is at war with my multiple personalities. I love everything that does not belong to me, which is to say my life. But I despise everything that belongs to me. Education, inherited psychology, physical attributes. In short, anything that is me because of exterior circumstances. My multiple selves are at war with my fundamental personality because one is never only one. I am aware that in writing this I've committed an error of diplomacy. I recognize that people will claim these notes and thoughts are confused, poorly expressed, as if expression has anything to do with it, emphatic, for they've been written day by day, even during the rain that threatens to close down the sky. I know that many will regard these statements as another example of bad taste, a poor substitute for poetry, when in fact poetry is not what I'm after. My fundamental self despises all that belongs to me. Multiple personalities, butterflies, and silent hoarding, each more poorly expressed than the previous era of diplomacy. Who claims these notes are inherited circumstances? My multiple selves are at war with substitutes for poetry. My fundamental self is at war with poems offered as substitutes. I know that many will conclude these statements do not belong to me. I am aware that in writing this during the rain, that it is not raining. I'm reading them from the order that they were written. So this is said by someone, these words all came from something said by a president on February 14, 2018. The president's telegram. No child or teacher should ever feel terrible in an American school. My prayers should feel safe to the victims of a terrible child. My condolences to the families of anyone else. Should anyone feel unsafe in school, my condolences. Should anyone feel unsafe in a family, my prayers. Should anyone else ever feel unsafe, my prayers and condolences. Should my prayers feel unsafe, my condolences to the terrible school, unsafe child, and unsafe teacher. Feel my prayers. And I'll just read one more. It's called the President's Second Telegram. This is said on May 18, 2018. It just uses the words from I'd do something to them. Unfortunately, earlier reports of school not looking good. Unfortunately, this loss of decades has been going on too long. We're with you forever in this sadness, school. We're affected by this absolutely terrible heartbreak hour. We send our love to everyone affected by our country. We send the loss of life, our horrific, deadly forever. We grieve for years of heartbreak in this tragic attack. After I turned 69, I don't imagine that a chariot is hurrying near, but that a sleek car is speeding up. I've started a list of the costumes I want to be buried in, beginning with horny centaur. I try to put aside obituaries, but I'm unable to do so for very long, maybe 10 minutes. I eat the same meal night after night while reading recipes of dishes I've never tasted. I shudder nearly every time I read the phrase lifetime guarantee or your money back. I no longer find it necessary to stop and look at what is going on at a construction site. I decide I won't tell people to stop sending me books, even if I'll never read them. I stop and watch ambulances trying to get past cars that don't want to move aside. I begin thinking about different methods I might use to remove myself from the story. I know what my friend meant when he said his couch would take his place on the couch. What my friend meant when he said his dog would take his place on the couch. I think about cities I will never return to, including Caracas and Caracas. I wonder when I will no longer begin a poem with the words if and when. I dream that my ashes will be scattered in a remote spot in Ireland that no one visits. I admit that shrinking into myself is not as unpleasant as I once thought. Um, this is for all you Carol Lombard fans who tell Jane Alice Peters, which was her pre-Hollywood name. I like sitting in hotel lobbies that are as big as the apse of a cathedral and strung with Christmas lights. I like it when my posterior sinks into the cushion provided by the hotel management for exactly this encounter between lower extremity and nuanced comfort. I like letting my spine and all the flesh that surrounds it fall back into the carefully rounded, slightly tilting support that's attached to an elevated pairing of horizontal cushions that rest securely on four elegantly turned legs. I like the silver claws that form the chair's feet. I like knowing the architecture of this assembly was constructed with human ease in mind. I like pretending that I belong in a lobby festooned with polished brass fixings reminiscent of another era, or framed by fluted marble columns harkening back to an even earlier era. I like knowing I can travel in time. This is when I start replaying my favorite interlude, when I begin dreaming of Carol Lombard, who died in a plane crash in Mount Potosi, Nevada, age 33. This happened on January 16, 1942. Today is January 17, 2019, more than 75 years later. Is there a hotel in Mount Potosi? Is it named after Lombard, third wife of Clark Gable? I like burrowing inside the extinct topography resurrected by young hotel designers, their manufactured version of our collective longing. I like their efforts to harness the barely controllable desire we have to step away from the time we inhabit into a hologram sector that has not been overrun by apocalyptic data. I like knowing that the scar a car accident left on Lombard's face cannot be completely erased, and we can see its trace on her cheek like a horizon line when the camera moves in close, as in Hands Across the Table, 1935, co-starring the charmless Fred McMurray. I like knowing that she did not want to simper prettily or scream in terror on the screen. I like knowing that the E was added onto her name by mistake and that she decided to keep it. I like knowing that she took life as it came, even if I'm not of that ilk and do not want to go down that tortuous path. All right, we're in the home stretch. Memories of Charles Street, Boston. I think this is an anti-memoir poem. All right, Memories of Charles Street, Boston. One day I wake up and my hair has turned white and I'm no longer Chinese. I want to ask my mother about this change in my appearance, but she's been dead longer than I've been alive. You have to take the good with the bad, she used to tell me, before trying to drown me in the bathtub. My father sat in the next room in his imported black underwear, smoking a perfumed cigar and jerking off in front of the television he had dragged in from the street. It never worked. It still doesn't. And the blue stains on the chair are why I never sit there. Chinatown Blues. Don't keep saying poetry makes nothing happen. I'm not trying to be your surrogate chaplain. I'm going to grow up and be a hatchet man, doing the sharp and shiny thing, being the best I can. Don't tell me the wood is far too green or yellow, or that Mr. Frost, protector of fences, is a jolly good fellow. I'm going to grow up and tell it slant. Don't even try and tell me I can't. Stop reminding me I have to watch what I say, be polite, or I'll have to pay and pay. I'm still going to grow up and be a hatchet man, doing the sharp and shiny thing, being the very best I can. And this is the last poem. Actually, I might not. So it's from a series of poems I wrote called Li Shangyin Enters Manhattan. And this is the last one in the series. 14. I left the drugstore and went and sat in the park. What language of waste had I been listening to without hearing what is there? Days grinding crust, depositing scales of human skin on sills and in our hair. Constant swirl we sit and stand in, move through, our ancestors all around us, waiting to be swept up once again from sidewalk and chair, barber shop pile up of hair, dust on hair, and in the air around us. What we lose of our bodies does not come back. Leave something behind each moment you breathe. Even in sleep, shedding continues, even in this poem, which I wrote before we met and after we parted. What happened in that interval, I still circle around, blossoms of magenta dust lifted to your lips. Thanks. Now you're supposed to interview me, Ken.
So your poetry is often associated with the visual arts, but since we're in a studio that's dedicated to the expression and archival of experimental sound, how do you think about sound when you write poetry?
Sometimes I'm led by sound. So, yeah. I mean, it's an interplay between meaning and sound for me, and also puns to undermine the word. So that comes out of sound, right? Things sounding alike. Um, yeah, I don't want to follow a narrative. I kind of, because most people, when they tell you their life story, you get bored, but even though you act interested, so I try to keep it interesting. There's nothing worse than a boring person at a party. There's nothing worse than a boring poet at a poetry reading.
I think we're all interested. Do you ever listen to music when you write?
No. Well, yes. Occasionally. I listen to classical music, or sometimes, like recently, I've been listening to early Philip Glass, the etudes, or some Morton Feldman. I don't know that they help me write, but they're in the background. I don't have it loud, just sort of softly in the background. Yeah, or Sabrachi. I don't know if you know him, an Iranian uh, piano composer who famously wrote an 8-hour piece in which no phrasing was repeated. So I kind of listen to something that I think will just undo my whatever my thinking is.
Okay. Yeah, I was Googling John Yau music, and it kept coming back with the line through music saying missing, 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 missing.
That's me.
But what did come up was you and Ken Vandermark did something at Oxbow a couple years ago,
Right,
and you played together, I guess separately, and then did stuff, and then worked together in a piece.
right.
What was that experience?
I so the only other time I've worked with 3 other people before, but I wouldn't say I worked with them. Someone set a group of my poems to music, more kind of in the post-classical modernist way, and then I worked with a student where I read a poem and then she distorted it through a kind of speaker system. And I worked, and there's a jazz musician named Don Ross who put my words through a loop and then played the clarinet to it. So I never worked with someone directly, and I thought, oh, okay, that'll never happen. And then Ken just heard me read, and he picked a pantoum, which has a particular repetitive structure, and wrote a song for it, or a tune, I guess. I don't know.
Pantune for a tune.
Tune. What do you call it, Ken? Sorry, I'm so dumb.
So you brought up Pantune. You've taken on different forms like odes and sonnets and pantoums. Some of them are more overtly associated with music, but a pantoum is more covertly in that it's repetitious and there's recursive stuff. I don't think you read a pantoum today. It's
No.
the first time I've ever seen you read where you didn't read one. But I'm curious because that seems to be a go-to form for you.
Yeah, it's I first learned about it from a pantoum in John Ashby's first book, and then I got obsessed with it years later because every line is repeated twice in a strict order, and it's a Malaysian folk song structure, and it had come into French poetry in the 19th century, and I just like the idea of repetition. Like, can you say something twice and it not mean the same thing? I just thought was an interesting challenge. So I started writing them as a practice form. Like, oh, let's just write them. And I wrote many, like 100 or 150, and they were all terrible. And then somewhere along the line, I broke down the structure. So the pantoum is 4-line stanzas, and I broke it down into 2-line stanzas, so that I could really see how the line changed in that strict 2-line form. And then I started writing ones I liked.
Yeah. So a couple of things that popped up in that music search. One is you had a book called Broken Off by the Music.
Right,
And then you had a pantoum called Music from My Childhood,
right.
which you said refers to the fact that I grew up in a household in which 2 languages were spoken. The repetition and the fact that every line is repeated seemed appropriate to the subject.
Yeah.
You were babysat at the movies. I read.
So my parents, I didn't know this was weird, but my parents would like to spend the weekends not hanging out with their child, and they'd bring me to the movie theater starting when I was 6 and leave me in a movie theater. They would pay the usher a dime so that no old men would sit next to me, which I didn't really understand till years later what that meant. And yes, I grew up, and they only brought me to adult movies. They somehow thought that children's movies I'd be with other children, so this was not healthy. And I'm not sure what that meant either. So I grew up, seeing movies with Elizabeth Taylor and starting at 6. Not half the time I didn't know what the movie was about. Couldn't follow the plot. It was beyond me. I saw a lot of westerns, war movies. Oh, the other thing is my parents, they had no money, so they would bring me to a double feature at this place called the Publix Theater, which I think was 40 cents for a double feature. It was like not a first run movie. It was like it was like the third time I was playing in movie houses. So I guess there were a lot of old men sitting in that movie theater. I don't know. I know there weren't any other children.
That's a lot of faith in the usher.
I know. That dime went a long
Dime,
way.
yeah, okay. So you must have seen detective movies because you have your own
I
detective.
did. I saw a lot of detective movies. I didn't quite get them when I was younger. Then when I was maybe 16, 16, I started going to the Brattle Street Theater in Cambridge. And that's where I saw like The Big Sleep and other noir films. And the language of, it's people like Faulkner and Chandler. How can you go wrong? And I didn't know that then. I just watched this great scene in a movie just to kind of go. So this older man and a supposedly younger woman, she's 23 she's 23 in actual age, but in the movie she's supposed to be over the hill at 30. Go into this room, he closes the door behind her, and he runs his finger over her shoulder, and she said, you're too old for me. And then he looks at her and says, well, you need a new paid job yourself. How can you go wrong with lines like that,
So you made up the character Genghis Chan
Right.
as your detective. Do you feel like you're a PI as a poet? Do you feel like you're a snoop? Do you feel
I
like you're on
think
the
in a
outside looking in?
way, that's one of my personae. And also, I really loved, if you watch a lot of the it's like James Wong. There's all these characters, Peter Lorre playing it, Boris Karloff, all these people playing, never played by an Asian. And I watched all of them, and then they have this horrible language, they can't speak English. And then you watch these other characters, Humphrey Bogart, Robert Mitchum, whatever, and you just go, wait a second. So I just decided to invent this character, Genghis Khan, right, the Mongolian, and Charlie Chan, so Genghis Chan. So that's how that happened.
You and I talked, I guess it was a couple years ago. You were thinking about doing a book on Yellowface with some of these characters you talked about who were playing Chinese people.
Yeah, I have a whole list of things. I researched for a long time, and I haven't quite figured out what to do with it. Every white actor that played Yellowface, including people like Katharine Hepburn, they're all people that needed to make money early in their career, and they all took on these roles. And I was really interested in the roles they played and things like that. So I have that. And then I have this other parallel, they're both halfway written, is every movie and TV program I ever watched with John Ashbery. So somehow I have to separate them a little more.
Yeah, he was obviously a big influence on you.
Yeah.
And he was very much into music.
Right.
And same with Creeley.
Right.
Creeley did a lot of stuff with Steve Lacy and Steve
Right.
Swallow.
And I'm really a listener to jazz, so we talked about that.
So you've been doing collaborative bookmaking as long as ESS has been archiving material, which is 5 decades. I've been with you on a couple places that you've gone, but you you write about the undersung, the unknown, the misrepresented, the ignored. Um, I was wondering how you came across those people, because if they didn't have a gallery, they didn't have an agent, they didn't have a show, how did you find them?
Well, partly through word of mouth from other artists, like an artist will say, "I know so and so, you should go to his or her studio." Some of the artists contact me. I have to kind of think about it because I get quite a few letters or emails now. It started, I guess, around the late 80s is when I wrote about Wilfredo Lam in the Museum of Modern Art. And he had the famous painting, The Jungle, was by the front door near the coat room. And I talked about how the MoMA had misrepresented him. And of course, the museum's response was totally great. They took the painting down and put it back in the basement the day the article came out. And the art world's response was equally great. No one said a thing. So I thought, okay, that's what I'm up against, you know.
Yeah, that was Wait by the Cloakroom.
Yeah.
Please Wait by the Cloakroom. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because that painting was a lot in dialogue with Picasso.
Right.
And go ahead.
Well, the way MoMA represented it was, Picasso's God and this man born in Cuba was just derivative. So they go on about the fact that the painting is a gouache on paper, but when he returns to Cuba, he can't paint on canvas because all the canvas is used to pack sugar to deliver to Europe during World War II. And they think they don't understand that he would reappropriate something. MoMA said, or William Rubin said, that he was the first surrealist to use ethnic sources, which denies the fact of his own ethnicity. And they ignored the fact that he was a Yoruba priest. His grandmother was a Yoruba priestess, and he grew up witnessing and participating in Yoruba rituals. And then the other most galling thing was someone, this is later, said he thought like a white intellectual. I thought, wow, okay, where does that put me? Anyway, so I wrote the essay kind of going through everything. All the egregious remarks were made, how they misunderstood the painting. And actually it was in a French text that had been translated in English that I learned a lot of this information. So I thought, here's France, the colonialist nation, being more responsive and open and understanding who Lam is. So that was also just a kind of eye-opener, like, read as much as possible and see what happens, see what you can learn.
Yeah, so the person that was derivative was Picasso, not Lam.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing, it's not been publicly announced, but I just got a letter from MoMA that they are going to do a retrospective of Wilfredo Lam in 2025. Yay.
That's great. So among the core values at ESS, talk a lot about the past informs and inspires invention and innovation. Experimentation requires both artistic rigor and risk, and collaboration activates growth. You've done a ton of collaborations with a bunch of different artists. And also, there's a statement that art criticism is a collaborative process. Do you feel like those things blend, go back and forth, or it's the same thing, or it's different, or?
In a way, art criticism's collaborative, but I think that could be really misunderstood. For instance, I've written about some artists whose names will go unmentioned, and these were positive reviews, so don't get me wrong. One artist said that I didn't handle his fame correctly, and he stopped talking to me. Another artist said that I had mentioned someone that his enemies would remember forever. Thought that was a long time, and he stopped talking to me. So I don't think it's collaborative in that way. I think in a way you're trying to be empathetic or sympathetic to the artist, but not necessarily. I mean, I've written many reviews of artists who I've never met, and have never talked to, and have never tried to be friends with. But I like writing about artists that the marketplace kind of overlooks or neglects. I don't believe. I mean, Peter Sheldon believed cream rose to the top. I do not necessarily think that's true, as you could see in the revision in the last 20 years that it's not true. So,
So just on your collaborations with other artists, there's a couple great quotes in Disguise the Limit. Collaboration is neither being dominant,
right,
pushing boundaries in pursuit of creating something unexpected.
right,
Notions of contingency, hands off, hands on, hands off, like handed off. And then a couple great quotes by Archie Rand, the generosity to merge and get beyond what we know. Like he said, we should do 1,000 of these.
right,
So
right. That was the first. We were standing in the parking lot. I had come up with the idea of collaborating, and he said we should do 1,000. I was like, and I said, why 1,000? And then he said, well, that way we'll get beyond what we know. And I thought that was just great. So, in a way, you're always. I mean, it's easy, and you can see in the art world, an artist settles into his or her own kind of mode of production, and then kind of does this for many years, and they kind of sometimes or often will get respected for it. And I feel like I don't want to do that, and it sort of seems like more about capitalism and production than about art, whatever art is. So I think collaboration on that level, challenges you because you're working with someone that pushes back against you in some way. And also the idea of sheer number of works is kind of getting beyond what you know how to do.
Okay, I got 4 quick questions from poets that you know,
Okay.
and then we'll open it up to others here if they want to ask. So the first one's from Pete Moore. Can collaboration be taught?
Taught? Yeah, I think taught. It can be talked about, and it can be shown, and then people can learn. It's really about getting past your own ego. So if you can get past your own ego, I think you can learn how to collaborate. It's about a different kind of conversation. I think so. I don't know what. I mean, in some level, sometimes I think nothing can be taught except physics. So,
Yeah. Joe Donahue says, is it true you were a drummer for Steely Dan?
no.
Okay. Albert Mobilio, what word or words do you worry about overusing in your poems?
Oh, blue sky, certain kind of plain words I just worry about.
Okay. I'll report back to him. And the last question from Michael Leong. Can you share some thoughts about the current state of American poetry? And this can involve anything from how it's written, read, circulated, discussed. Have there been recent developments that have excited you, concerned you, bored you? Save the heaviest for last.
You did. I think it's a pretty interesting moment, and I think almost every periodical gets it wrong. I mean, in terms of what they promote. But I think poetry itself is pretty in a really interesting state. And I always am getting books sent to me in the mail and finding, like someone sends me something, oh, I never heard of this person. And it's pretty interesting. And they get almost often, many of them get no play at all. And now if you read like the London Review of Books or anything in England, they were like more responsive to poetry than anything. I mean, the New York Times is like atrocious. Let's just be frank. And the New York Review of Books is pretty atrocious in terms of, because it doesn't sell. It's just somehow, it's capitalism. Whereas in the, Times Literary Supplement, they often review books and I'm sure 87 copies sell, and they don't seem to get uptight about it, and I'll be the 88th person that goes in and buys it. Sometimes I wonder why, but you know what I mean. And I feel like if we can spend $20, I mean, I just spent $11 getting a coffee and a pastry. You can spend 11. You can get 2 pastries and 2 coffees or a book of poetry, which lasts longer. I mean, it's that kind of that blunt, right? So, and there's there's libraries and there's lots of stuff online. So I feel like people are just, and you're taught poetry in a kind of horrible way in high school, and kind of, it's almost like the teacher hates poetry, so they're going to get all their students to hate it. So they make you read it allegorically, and you go on and on about 2 roads diverge in the yellow, blah, 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 blah. And by the end of it, you hate poetry, So anyway, I won't blather on and rant. This is Thomas Bernhard, by the way, one of the great ranters of all time. So, yay, Tom, for ranting.
So if anybody would like to ask any questions, I'll bring you the microphone so that they can. So you have to ask in the microphone.
Thanks. Thank you very much for your reading. I really enjoyed it. I just want to say about like Wilfredo Lam, one of my favorite painters, and I'm pretty sure he said in an interview that his paintings were basically a rejection of Western ideas, Western paintings concepts, what are art concepts. And I think the one with the jungle is basically the other looking back.
That's right. That's exactly right. I talked about that in my essay. They're looking back, but you can't enter the jungle as they're entering into it, right? And there's that pair of scissors floating, like, can you cut your way into it, or are you going to destroy the painting? And there is no jungle in Cuba, so it's really an invented place, and then a lot of the ones with the female figure holding another figure, it's not the Madonna, it's really this other relationship, and I think those are really wonderful.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. There's at least one of his paintings was taken out of the country at the when the Cuban Revolution happened by Batista, and there's like a little museum in Daytona Beach, Florida, where they have Cuban art.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they've got all this stuff that Batista, took with him.
Absconded with.
Absconded, thank you. Looking for a good word for that. My question would be kind of, well, first of all, do I have to, not have to, I want to read your books, but would you prefer I read your books to understand why your mother tried to drown you, or did she actually do that? And how should I approach
Well, 2 books. You should read 2 books. Let's just be honest up front. Go out and buy these 2 books. One would be Please Wait by the Coat Room, which is a selection of essays of non-white artists, starting with Lam and coming down to the present. And also, partly because he was biracial, I talk about the fact that America sees everything in black and white, but in fact, there's more colors in America than black and white. So it's Asian art. I mean, there's a lot of different other artists there. And then I guess my most recent book would be Tell It Slant. And that's the title obviously is a response to Emily Dickinson, right? Tell the truth, but tell it slant. And I kind of pointed this out recently, that when an Asian hears the word slant, they might hear it slightly different than other people. So that's why I turned it around. And I have a little epigraph where I quote Emily Dickinson, and then I quote this movie where it says, "You slant-eyed yellow bastard," and that's I use it to kind of get it across. So those are the 2 books I'd recommend. Yep. And my Lam essay is reprinted until it's in Please Wait by the Coat Room. What? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
John, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your recent exhibition of collaborations with visual artists, which is a
Right.
different kind of collaborative process.
I gave a talk at the University of Kentucky about artist hair and all these different people, and then I thought, why don't I put in some of my own collaborations? Why do I keep talking about other people like I don't exist? And then I put some in, and then the curator said, started asking me about them. I said, oh, I did it with this person, that person. And I think one of the things that got him was I said, oh, I've done it with students. I've done it with well-known people. I'll do it with anybody. I don't want to make it hierarchical, because I said that a lot of artists, they only collaborate with famous poets and stuff like that. So whatever famous poet means. And then he came to my house, and I started pulling him out of drawers and stuff under the bed. And he went, how many of these do you have? I said, they're all in my house. Nobody wants these things. And that's how the show happened. So it's, I think, 50 artists or more. And then actually I've now since found works by like another 15 artists that I forgot that I even did it with. So at one point I was calling him up going, yeah, and then I found this. And he goes, no more, because it was just too much. So, and also every collaboration, it's kind of guided by the artist to some degree. So that also makes you think differently, right? So that was very helpful. And also, because you have to, in some cases, do it right at that moment, you've kind of become much more loose, right? As a poet, you kind of might freeze up and go, what can I say? And then suddenly it's like this other guy's just doing one watercolor after another, and you go, oh, screw that. I'm just going to go like him, So that was pretty liberating. Any other questions?
I loved the interview you did with Hyperallergic maybe a couple of years ago to their podcast.
Oh, yeah, where I blathered on for 3
Fantastic.
hours.
So awesome. About moving to New York and how you became an art critic. And you asked a critic to teach you how to be an art critic, and he said, just do it.
Right.
And so it kind of prompts a question for me. What's the best advice you ever got from a poet?
Oh, so the one I kind of, I got two. One was, I was at Bob Creeley's house, and he came downstairs with a computer, and I had not used one yet, and it was a little Dell, and pointed to it and said, there's masterpieces on this, John. I was like, okay, I guess I go home and get a computer. And then another one, the other one that I always kind of sticks in my head is Ron Padgett and I are walking down the street, and he goes, well, at this point you can go home and write a poem. It's whether it's a good poem or not. And I was like, you can go home and write a poem? You're like, And I knew he was right, but it was one of those, like, things that just kind of lights a bulb in your head. So I think those are the two. It was kind of loosen up, as in some way, both of them were saying loosen up. And I think the third thing would be, and I've said this to someone recently. So John Asher and I were talking, we were eating a pizza and reading the New York Times somewhere, and he just goes, you can overthink everything. Maybe, and then the second part of it was, don't be too smart. And this is from one of the most brilliant people I ever met in my life. And he's like saying, don't be too smart, don't overthink stuff. And so that was pretty liberating too. So I
That's
guess
awesome.
those.
Thank you.
Yep.
So this is the book that John was asking about the show. It's called Design the Limit. I would get it. I got it. It's from the University of Kentucky and is going to be touring, I think, starting in October.
Right, it's going to go to Ashland, Oregon, and then I think 2 other places, but that they haven't been signed on the dotted line yet, whatever that means.
So watch this space on that. It's a privilege being here. Thanks to John. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.